Good afternoon, everyone. So let's discuss motivational interviewing on juvenile justice involved adolescents as an evidence-based approach. So exactly who are these youth? Who are these juvenile justice youth we're talking about? These youth are youth that I have focused on specifically that live here in the state of Tennessee. They usually range from the age of 10 to 19 years of age. However, some youth as young as 8 has been placed on probation. The youth can be of any race, origin, sex, or nationality, and they can only be a part of the juvenile justice system if they've been charged with some type of crime, whether it be a misdemeanor offense, an offense if you as an adult would be punished by 1129, or a felony offense, which is more of a serious offense. I apologize, everyone. I've been a little bit sick. Um, these youth typically face multiple risk factors that has brought them into the juvenile justice system, such as substance abuse, different types of family conflict, trauma exposures, environmental conflicts or exposures. Negative peer association is a very common reason for youth to end up coming into the juvenile justice system. Lack of supervision by their parents, especially if their parents are single parents and have to work. We see that very common. If their families already have departmental history, so they've got an extensive amount of history already with the department. Educational impairments usually causes a lot of frustrations where youth ends up acting out in schools, causing them to be placed in the juvenile justice system, along with other types of mental health concerns. So, what typically happens when a youth is found guilty of a crime? A youth can be placed in a juvenile justice facility on a determinate or an indeterminate sentence. An indeterminate sentence runs in 6-month terms. Determinate is for a determined amount of time, typically until a juvenile's 19th birthday. Youth can also be placed on county probation through the county, the crime that was committed. And youth can be placed on state probation, which in Tennessee is through the Department of Children's Services. So we have to ask, is there really a population of juvenile offenders? Because a lot of individuals seems to have a hard time realizing how many youth we truly have that is out there committing crimes and are a part of the court systems. Per the Juvenile Justice Annual Report for the state of Tennessee, in 2024 there was excuse me guys, there were 2,451 youth ordered to be placed on state probation across the state. There was an additional 633 youth that had exited the juvenile justice custodial system, but was still being overseen by probation as well. Each month in the year 2024 fluctuated with how many youth were coming into custody, with roughly we was looking at about 600 youth a month. Our main focus as juvenile social workers or juvenile probation officers is keeping these kiddos in the community. We can do this by ensuring that the youth in the community around them are safe. That is our number one goal, is we want to make sure that the youth are safe, their families are safe by them remaining at home with them, and that the community as a whole is safe. We can do this by ensuring that they abide by their court-ordered requirements, ensure they follow their rules of probation, and align the youth with services that are deemed necessary. What happens when these youth are in noncompliance of their court orders and their terms of probation? These youth can then face additional sanctions, such as being placed on house arrest with or without an ankle monitor. They can also just be placed on an ankle monitor to observe their location. They can be court-ordered mandatory services. It can result in loss of privileges for them where they're not able to play sports, they're not able to play on game systems, have cell phones, just significantly limit what they can do as a child. Youth can also face a violation of probation that could result in them being placed in a juvenile justice facility. Also, when they're in noncompliance, it could prolong the amount of time of the probation services. The $1 million hard question: how do we get these youth to comply? The number one answer is by motivational interviewing. Motivational interviewing allows us to ask open ended questions, provide affirmations, reflections, and summaries to the youth and their families. By integrating a person centered approach, through asking open ended questions, it allows us to get more information from the youth to be able to better serve them. So, for example, if you ask a youth how they can incorporate the court ordered requirements in the rules of probation to be consistent with what they're wanting, their own desires, their own needs, their own hopes, their own values, we're more likely to get more information on how we can better serve them instead of it being about just being punitive. We also can help build their confidence by pulling out their strengths and any positives in their life. A lot of times, our juvenile justice youth don't get to hear the good about them. They're usually told how bad that they are because they're typically getting in trouble, being defiant. Um, so, when we're able to let them know, hey, you're a good kiddo, we just made some mistakes, they're more prone to give you the time of day to listen. Um, some, excuse me, guys. Look at some real life examples. Now, I do want to note that these names are fictional as they've been changed due to confidentiality. So, our first example is Miss Jane. She is a 15-year-old female that was placed on state probation due to marijuana possession. Upon initially meeting Jane, she continually had her face into her phone. Like, she did not want to put down her phone. Whatever was going on the phone was more important, clearly, to her than meeting with the probation officer to try to gather better understanding of the situation and see if we could implement a plan. The probation officer utilized reflective listening to be able to find out that Jane smoked marijuana to cope with stress at school as well as her personal life. Jane has explained that there's a lot of kids at school that is bullying her, and then when she comes home, she feels like her parents is always nagging. So she decided that she was going to begin smoking marijuana, and once she did so, that it kind of put her in a state of mind where it made everything easier to deal with. So when we asked her what her hopes was for probation, she shrugged and she admitted that she doesn't want to go into a juvenile justice facility. So by using motivational interviewing, we was able to help Jane explore how her desire to remain at home and then the community conflicts with her using marijuana. Was able to, over amount of time, it didn't happen on the first visit, excuse me, to get Jane to realize that she needed to complete an alcohol and drug assessment and then follow the recommendations of an IOP class. Jane also had voiced over time that she could create a goal of not smoking marijuana by choosing better friends, as her entire peer group also smoked. By allowing Jane to make her own plan, Jane ended up becoming successful in getting off probation within a 4-month term instead of a 6-month term. Another case example is Jeffrey. He's a 17-year-old male who had repeated curfew violations. Curfew violations could have resulted in additional sanctions or violation of probation. However, we utilized motivational interviewing, which allowed for us to look at the underlying reason for why Jeffrey was not abiding by his curfew. Jeffrey advises us that he stayed out late to avoid conflict at home, that it seemed like if he was at home, him and his mom was always arguing, and he was worried that at some point the argument might turn physical, leading to more police involvement and then him possibly coming into custody. We was able to work with Jeffrey, allowing him to decide alternatives so that he would not be violating his curfew any longer. The alternative took consideration into the situation of his home life while meeting the probation requirements. Jeffrey was required to have to get permission from the probation officer for him to be able to be in a home where it was not his actual home. So before Jeffrey could just go off and do whatever he wanted past curfew, he had to call and get permission or text and get permission. If he was not able to get that permission, then he was not able to go out past curfew. This example mirrors implementation of findings that the motivational interview-based supervision results in improved communication and fewer negative interactions. The last case example I'm going to go over is Tyrone. He's a 17-year-old male who is currently in juvenile for attempted second-degree murder of his father. So sorry, y'all. I currently have pneumonia, so I'm trying to get through this. Tyrone had advised once we let him know that we wanted to know his side of the story. Instead of what the officer wrote in the petition and what it looks like on paper. That he had harmed his father because he was not going to allow his father to hurt him any longer as a method of survival. So during our talk with Tyrone, we found out that he had an extensive history with the Department of Children's Services due to allegations of severe child abuse, where Tyrone had actually been removed in the past. Tyrone advised that his dad has tried killing him multiple times and that he threatened to kill him the day he stabbed his father with a knife. Tyrone said that his goal that day was in fact to kill his father so that he could no longer hurt him or his siblings. Tyrone admits that he tried family therapy and individual therapy, but he became physically aggressive with the therapist and was discharged. By utilizing reflective dialogue, it helped Tyrone see that avoiding conflict when he gets upset or when he's told what to do aligns with his long-term goals, which is that he wants to be successful. He doesn't want to remain in the juvenile justice system, illustrating why motivational interviewing helps with addressing high-risk behaviors such as aggression. It also allowed us to come up with a game plan with Tyrone where he received a full psychological and a mental health assessment and was able to get medicated. So I want you guys to think about the 3 scenarios that we went over, and you guys tell me, how do you think that motivational interviewing impacted each of these youth, or what we could have done in addition to be more effective with the youth? So motivational interviewing seems so easy, right? But has it really impacted juvenile justice youth? Well, according to the National Library of Medicine, they found in a study that they did that 72.9% of the treatment group for juvenile justice youth was still in good standing 6 months post-adjudication, compared to 50% in the control group where motivational interviewing was not used. That study is huge because that shows that motivational interviewing, by just letting these kids take control of their own life, their goals, their probation, by having affirmations, by reflecting, by summarizing, exactly what had been talked about, that it was extremely impactful for these youth to remain out of custody. Since my department, the Tennessee Department of Children's Services, began utilizing motivational interviewing with the juvenile justice youth, we have seen a decrease in the amount of youth that gets remanded into custody, with only 2% of the youth that was placed on probation resulted in a custodial episode. In conclusion, by utilizing motivational interviewing from the beginning of a probational episode, by asking the open-ended questions, offering the empathy, offering the affirmations, and by reflecting, it has significantly reduced the amount of youth entering into the juvenile justice system. If motivational interviewing is utilized effectively, the officer will be able to assess, the needs of the youth, where they see themselves, and what services that they need to be implemented to help them hone into the skills they already have. When you aren't taking the lead but allowing the youth to take the lead, that is when you realize that motivational interviewing is becoming effective, and where you're able to guide the youth into leading into a positive outcome. Motivational interviewing has been huge for the department that I work with. We actually have to utilize it with every single case that we have. And I can honestly say, when we ask those open-ended questions, when we let these kids take control, instead of being punitive or argumentative or demanding that they complete these terms, that is when we see the success. That is when we don't see these kids coming into custody, where we have to worry about, when they do come into custody, what is that going to look like for them? Are they going to get beat up? Are they going to become institutionalized? Are they going to get into additional behaviors while they're in custody? And are they going to end up going into the adult juvenile justice system? Please let me know if you guys have any questions on the juvenile justice system, the youth that we serve, and how motivational interviewing has helped us.